Good evening. My name is Rob Cassetti, and I'm a Senior Director for Marketing, Creative Services, and Design here at Corning. Thank you, my lovely fan club. I can't think of a better place for you to meet Tom Phifer than in this remarkable space that he designed, this industrial cathedral devoted to exploring the power and potential of glass. In 1995, after 20 remarkable years of working in the offices of Gwathmey Siegel and Richard Meyer, Tom was awarded the Rome Prize, and for him it was a transformative experience. Among other life-changing things, he came back home to New York and after returning from Rome and started his own firm, Thomas Phifer and Partners. Tom is a fellow of the American Institute of Architects, and he's received the highest recognition possible for an individual or firm in New York State, the Medal of Honor from the New York chapter of the American Institute of Architects. I first met Tom Phifer a little more than 10 years ago at a party in New York City celebrating the 100th anniversary of Steuben Glass, and poetically enough, where Steuben Glass was made in this very room. The museum was already in the process of investigating an expansion, and Tom's work and aesthetic fit perfectly with the vision of a new wing. And even though this was 10 years ago, over the years, Tom's name kept appearing and reappearing on our short list of architects. When the expansion project was approved and the funding was approved by Corning Incorporated, a remarkable moment in time, we asked 3 firms to visit the museum, 3 firms from our short list, and to meet with us for an interview in their offices, and then to visit the museum. So, as you would imagine what those kind of things look like, a small army of principals from the firm came here, van full of people, consultants, because they want to learn about the project. They want to be informed about what it could be, how they could solve the problem, and also win the commission. And the last firm that we interviewed in this process was Thomas Phifer and Partners. And Tom completely surprised us by showing up for these meetings alone. And when he visited the site, and more specifically, when we met with him in his office for, I don't know, it was 2 or 3 hours, Tom didn't talk about architecture and engineering and waterproofing and all the stuff you typically talk about with a big architectural project of this scale and magnitude. Tom talked about glass, he talked about light, and most importantly, he talked about art. And we were absolutely and completely hooked. New York Times writer Alexandra Lang, in a recent article about the expansion project, describes Tom Phifer this way: he is simultaneously mild and intense, friendly, and thoroughly wrapped up in the details and processes required to get architecture just right. I think you would agree, at the Corning Museum of Glass, he got the architecture just right. Please welcome Tom Phifer.
Wow. That is so nice. Thank you, Rob. It's really an honor to be here. Coming up on the plane today, I was trying to figure out whether this can qualify as a homecoming just 1 month out. But I'm going to take it as a homecoming. It was, finishing a project for an architect is hard. It's great because we finished. But it's sad because I'm not going to see you guys anymore, or as much. But it's a great thing to have worked here for the last 3 years with Tina and Carol and Marie and Joe and Rob and just a whole host of people. I mean, I was kind of amazed when I came up here the first time. I didn't really know what to expect. As Rob said, I kind of came alone. And I kind of got back on the plane in the afternoon, and I thought to myself, there's really something here that I can't put my finger on. And for 3 years, I've called it a kind of magic that's here at Corning, a kind of an ethos, this kind of innovative spirit that is really hard to describe, but it's here. And I think this building is a testament to everyone's kind of true collaborative spirit. I've never quite come to a moment in a project like this. So I think this is a time for us all to celebrate this new wing. And what I'd like to do tonight is to just walk you through the story as I remember it. See how good my memory is. And it seems to have started with this alto vase, which I think has taken on a life of its own. But I was actually trying to be anecdotal, and all of a sudden it's kind of taken on a life. But I really did take this alto vase out onto Varick Street when we got the commission. And because I didn't really understand glass, and I thought, here we have a piece of glass, there's some flowers in it, why don't we just take it out on Varick Street and see what it does? And lo and behold, it really did start to glow, and the thing that really glowed was the section of the glass, the kind of detail up there. It sparkled. It was a really bright day, and I think the light began to turn on, so to speak, and we began the journey to try to understand glass, because I'd never worked on a building that wanted to have its voice through glass. So this really was the starting point. And I'll show you some slides along the way. And I wrote a little paper just before we were awarded the commission. I guess you'd call it a letter, because I did understand the artist Dan Graham and his sense of marking a place through the reflectivity of glass, and I understood Jim Terrell and his sense of light, but I didn't quite understand the actual materiality, the kind of surface, the kind of transparency, and what this material really meant until we walked that little vase out on Varick Street. And then at the same time that I was up here, we walked around and looked at the works, and I have to say, this piece and the next piece really struck me. I loved these works. They were serious, which I loved, and they were poetic. And they resonated with me. They really resonated with me, and that was kind of launching off. And then I think I talk about this one with Tina all the time. This one was situated in such a place that it was getting a lot of light on it, and it just began to sparkle. And I think this began, the journey a little bit too, of trying to understand this sense of this material and how to honor it. And so within the month, we began to study this material. I think before we even began to understand what the building was even beginning to become, we began to look at light here and what it did to glass, and we put it in the computer. We worked for these 3 years with Ova Arup. They're a firm, they're an engineering firm that does a lot of daylighting and does all of our electric lighting. And we asked them to put a glass object under daylight, and how much light would it really take for this work to just come alive. And we discovered that that number was way up there, that it was 450, 500 foot candles, that we had to really put a lot of light in. And about the same time, we started to learn um, that glass loves light, and it's not damaged by light. It's not like a painting, it's not like a work on paper, but that light really is the thing that brings it home, that brings it to life. And so we also then learn that temperature and humidity are the enemy of glass, and those things need to be controlled like any museum. So we had to really have a mechanical system there that was able to deal with that. And also because we were bringing in so much heat, we thought very early on about stratifying the heat way up top, so that we could get it out of the building. So all of these 450-foot candles wouldn't overheat the space. So there was a lot of this early work that began to shape the building before we even knew what the building was. The other thing that struck me when I was wandering around that first day when I was up here was the campus and the site. And when I arrived, you can see that the bus parking lot was just to the north of the new expansion building. And we began to talk, I think that first time I was up there, about certainly the second time we met in our office in New York, we talked about what it would take to get rid of the buses. There was a little bit of an alarmed look on everyone's face. You know, I mean, the buses were there and they weren't, this is how people get here. It's kind of a little bit of a tough moment there. Wondered, that's probably going to kill us. We're never getting that. But you know, we began to talk about a new center, a new place, a new campus green, a new kind of center for this wonderful ensemble of buildings here that has such a rich history. We began to talk about this being the campus green and this being the place where this building could open up to the landscape and be a memorable place where people would come and remember what it was like to be at the center of this place. And so we first of all just made this very simple diagram right here as we talked a little bit this morning. This L-shaped green was proposed to be a garden. And I think now this, this place to the north will become a garden. And the red there was the expansion and the restoration of this beautiful ventilator building that we're sitting in today. So this was the genesis, this was the site, and the setup was this material that was glass. And so then we began to talk. I think it began from the moment I arrived until the moment we had the party a month ago. It became this extraordinary collaborative effort with everyone here at Corning. I mean, everyone from the buses to everything began to teach us. It began to kind of give voice to this place. And we began to learn about how to come into the lobby, move through to the hot glass show, have a core that resonated with bathrooms, how that all wanted to be entertained there. And about that same time, we began to go and visit other glass museums. And we learned very quickly that glass doesn't love sidelight. That when you put it in silhouette, it begins to darken up immediately. No matter how much light you put from the top, if you have glass that's lit from the sides, it begins to darken and you get it into a place where you can't see the detail. We learned that very early. And so we also learned, since I'm not sure how much to lean on this, but I'm a Southerner, I'm from South Carolina, and the porch was very meaningful to me. And so I call this area that wraps around, particularly the three sides that open to the campus, as a porch where you can go and begin to be a part of the landscape. and the campus there. And so that we put the glass in these 5 rooms that would receive complete top light. And so that was another revelation we had about giving these different installations that we worked very closely on, sizes and proportion of these rooms, but that they would be enclosed with only top light, and the porch would have them views outward. And so then we began to develop the plan, and as a kind of intuitive thing, we were at the same time going to Tacoma. We were going and watching glass being made, which I had never seen before, Toledo. And it was such a soft material. It was so sensuous and beautiful. And I began to think about a kind of a softness here, about a softness of the architecture and the glass. And at the same time, I've always been an admirer of Bryce Marden's paintings. These extraordinary works that he learned to make with a stick, with a long stick and a canvas. And he makes these kind of gestures, and he overlays the drawing. And he draws drawing on top of drawing, and you can see how he deals with the intersections of each one of those lines, and you can see how he deals with the edge of the canvas. And I began to think the kind of softness of these rooms with the kind of intersection of these lines would begin to make a proper place for these works, because it was the first museum that we had designed as an experience where we didn't have to hang things on the walls, that these objects sat on the floor, and hence we could walk into a cloud. And so this is the final shape of the walls after probably 30 or 40 tries. And you begin to see the abstraction of these rooms. And we began to think then about how do we push this light down to the floor. We need this light. And we thought about this rhythm of beams that runs east-west, which you see overlaid here in this drawing. And at the same time, we kept for the 2 years that we were working, developing this, we went to Ova Arup and we began to think about trying to understand every one of these rooms as an extension of the sky and how much light it is. Are we really going to get even light down there? They could dial up just about any day, any moment of the year, and tell us and predict what was happening here. We built computer models, we built physical models, and we began to understand the light, that light was really it. And so then along the way, we discovered that if we wanted to push the light to the floor, we needed a vertical surface. And rather than making a kind of cosmetic vertical surface, we wanted to make a structural surface there that would really support the building, support the roof. And so we began to imagine these beams, these very thin beams, 3.5 inches by 4 feet tall, very long, 50, 60 feet long in the longest case, and making it out of authentic gray concrete and allowing those and spacing those in such a way so that the light would bounce around them and off them. And after doing a lot of experiments on the computer, we realized that the light was, through these beams, was really getting pushed down to the floor. We found this great Canadian firm here to build these. They did a remarkable job. They are as straight as an arrow, and the precision here, I forgot who it was. I mean, I was in such a fog for the opening. But somebody, I'm sure it was somebody from Corning, came up and they were kind of amazed that we got, and Joe got, the alignment of the beams with the alignment of the plates, with the alignment of the walls, with the alignment of the exterior sheetrock. I mean, that was a remarkable task. and it came from these beams, and it came from this level of precision that this building needed to have. And this drawing is a little bit hard to see, but you can see the amount of technology that's buried in this minimalist work. These concrete walls are hollow. They hold all of the air that comes up through them out of the top, and they return inside the entrances and the portals. The beams are spaced just wide enough so we can get a lift up through to wash the glass, to deal with the sprinklers, to install the speakers, to work on the speakers. Everything up there that is hidden from sight is serviceable, and the lights are all there. So that with the poetry of the light, there is this technical side to this building that had to be there to support the museum. But also these walls form the core to the building, which it's going to be hard to tell this story. These walls are poured in place concrete and deal with the structural stability, like at the core of an office building. Whenever the wind is pushed onto the face of the building, all of the forces are transferred back into the beams to the walls, and the walls keep the building sturdy. So the walls are the structure, they're kind of the poetry of this space. They hold the air, and they begin to tell the story about receiving the light. And of course, there is rain outside, unfortunately for all of us architects. And so the skylights drain, they drain into a gutter, and they drain to the edges. You can imagine the technical challenges here to receive this absolutely minimal work here. And so with that story, Ewan Bond and James Ewing captured the poetry of these pictures that I still can't believe. And they kind of mark a moment here of trying to remove all of the distractions, because we had imagined these works simply levitating off the floor without distractions. And that took a long time to get all of those distracting things that all of a sudden jerk you back to reality, to removing those and allowing the visitor, allowing the patron, the people to come in and get absorbed and lost in the work. I love this work by Ed Reinhardt, which I don't have right here. I love Ed Reinhardt's work. I saw one at the Whitney just this past week. It's a black painting, and at first glance, it's just a black painting. But after a while, you look at it for 20 minutes, you look at it for 5 minutes, you keep staring at it, and all of a sudden, this red cross begins to slowly come. And he wanted to make these pictures so that you would, in fact, get lost in his paintings. It would take you to another place, and we hope that by eliminating the distractions, by removing this, that you will get lost in these extraordinary works, because the building is in service of these works. We worked with Carol and Tina and Marie and Rob and everyone here to collaborate on the installations. It was truly a collaborative effort on where these works were. Of course, you guys decided what they would be, but all of the installations here were done in a collaborative way, and it was one of the most extraordinary experiences I've had, meeting after meeting after meeting, refining and tuning and making this project really what it is today, because of course it looks kind of beautiful without anything, but it really begins to come alive with these works in it. This is all in service. And these works that hang here just seem to kind of hang from the sky. And then there are these moments, and I was trying to say in an interview that I had today, you think you understand what a building is, but not a building with light. I mean, we really thought we knew what this was going to be, and I walk in again this afternoon, and you see a bolt of light like the one that is coming here, and you just, at least with me, there's kind of a tingle that goes on there because the light is just remarkable. It's unpredictable. It's poetic. It marks that moment. It really just brings this space alive and begins to celebrate in a kind of wonderful way the works that are there. It kind of is I kind of described it like this to one of the moments here as being a little bit of a kind of a light halo over this, that the light is really the poetry that connects. And so here, I think it may have been Marie came up to me once. I hope she's not watching the streaming here. She said, this looks just like the rendering. Heavens. And it kind of does. I think Isaiah King, who rendered these in our office, did a great job, and it was good that the rendering didn't scare anyone off. But the light, as you can see in these wonderful pictures of Iwan's, just really make this space come alive. And then, just like I could imagine extruding a Bryce Martin painting, the way these lines begin to intersect become a few corners here, and the rest are these soft spaces. We've worked very hard on the height of this space, it being 20 feet, the height of the beams, the height of the skylight, to begin to let this space open up to the work so that ceiling would not be solid, but it would change as you walked into the space, and then as the space began to rise above you, and it began to kind of levitate the works off of the floor. And then there was all of the discussion about the boardroom, and the boardroom overlooking this space, and finding a home for that, and finding a section for that within this was a wonderful discovery there. And you can see a few of the lights that are beginning to come here. And this is a shot from the boardroom, which I love, of the works there over in the space. And a little bit of the technology of how these beams are held into place with these beautiful plates that are made that connect the forces from the beams into the walls, transferring the loads into these hollow structural walls. And then when you look up, the space begins, because these beams are so thin, the space just begins to kind of expand upward into the light. And we made this kind of dapple light, about, I don't really remember exactly the proportion, but maybe 30% of the ceiling is made of these solid panels, and about 10% are completely clear glass, so that the light is not particularly even. There's some variation in the space, and then you get these direct rays of sun that come in ways that one can never expect. And they begin to intersect, they begin to bring a kind of an order to the kind of softness of the architecture. And then I love these lights here, the way that they begin to add that other dimension. If you ever see the architect, most architects come in and rearrange the furniture. I come in and turn the lights out. I'm not sure I'm so welcome here anymore, but I'm gonna keep trying. And so here is this room that is called the changing gallery, that is soft and moves and changes with the light, and will change over time, depending on what the program is for the space. And then these portals open up from the porch so that you can move freely from the big window, this very long window that opens to the green, and move into these spaces very softly, not abruptly, but kind of moving along the wall and move gingerly into the space. The portals are 10 feet high, exactly half of the height of the walls. We tried very hard to proportion the beams and proportion the openings and proportion the height of the openings in the walls so that the room would at once have a kind of intimate feeling with the works, but would also have a sense of monumentality, because in fact, these rooms really frame and honor the works. But they also want to celebrate the works, that the scale of these rooms and the kind of repetition of the beams begins to make a statement about the kind of grandeur of the work and the celebration of the voices that these works have about our time. These works are made with our spirit, with our moment here. I think we wanted this room to simultaneously be one with the works, but have a sense that this is celebrated here at Corning, this magical act of making and revealing this glass. And some of the portals are a little bit classical. We put this one kind of right at the apex of this curve, kind of right on center, so that it would begin to center up that room there. This was the permanent exhibition room. And another shot about how these walls begin to come together. And then out on the porch, these windows begin to frame different places on the green, kind of unexpected views. Views of the ventilator building, the hot shop building, views of the green, views of the front door, tiny views of the mountains in the distance, the hills, so that you really never know what is coming along this journey around the porch. And the wall is just moving along. And I love Tina here looking up at this thing that she wonders how was ever installed. I wonder how this was ever installed. This is just a magnificent work here. These rooms were curated in a really magical way. And then something that we worked on for a long time was this kind of double portal here that you can see from the entrance through the east side, and how you can go into the permanent exhibition there on the left and the changing exhibition and on the right, and they share this wall and they part against this wall, so that every opening is unique. It's a kind of a unique experience of moving into these rooms. And again, of the porch. And I love this picture by Ewan because it just creates this atmosphere that we were trying to make about the afternoon light moving in, and about how the light really made this kind of moment that could be captured only at this time. And a view from the outside at night, how these windows begin to have a kind of a softness to them. And then just very quickly, as I finish up, about the outside of the building here. And all along, we were looking at this, a couple of images that took us a while to get to kind of find the right place for this building to sit, was this amazing work by Ronnie Horn. It was cubic. It was made out of one material. It happened to be glass. but the more light you pushed into it, the more it pushed out back at you. And it began to speak about the nature of the material in its own way. And because I loved it because it was so simple, and because of its simplicity, it began to honor the material, I think, more. And you could begin to see, as the further you looked into this cube, the more light, the more depth it had. And we also looked at Donald Judd a lot. These beautiful aluminum boxes, and particularly how Donald Judd made these beautiful boxes and he exposed the edge. There's a little tiny edge in the way that they were screwed together. And we began to think about the simplicity of this box. This is a bit of a kind of a point counterpoint here, but there's the building. And I think that's not so much of an accident. I think that kind of Donald Judd moment where you take a singular object, the simpler, the more it honors the material, the more it begins to deal with the light. And we began to talk about this as a vitrine that honored what was inside. And we then began to think about these enormous pieces of glass, in some cases 10.5 feet by 22 feet high, with a really small joint, a kind of monolithic reading of this glass. And of course, the difficult detail, as you can see here, is the detail of how this glass goes from being a rain screen, which is a screen where the waterproofing is behind it, to a window that's indoors. It takes an enormous amount of wonderful, wonderful work by the Corning team and by the subcontractors in Germany and in Austria to make the detailing for this so that we could take an exterior situation and turn it into a window that you looked out of and still had a monolithic reading there. And so this is the part I love too. These pieces of glass had these beautiful aluminum carvings on the back, and like you hang up a shirt in your closet, these things just hung on the building. It's so straightforward and yet so difficult to imagine. And I mean, this is just remarkable. And, you know, this is what I mean when I say the ethos of this little place here, to make a building with this kind of technology and to have the heart to do it, I think is a remarkable testimony to what this place is. Here are some more of them. I just love these pictures. Look at how thick that carving is there that this hangs on. So here are some of James Ewing's pictures at night. I love the kind of monolithic reading of the building here, and how the building at some point begins to softly reflect the sky and begins to darken and lighten depending on the character or the light. The window begins to bleed into the whiteness. The tree begins to come in softly. The color of the sky begins to melt into the facade. This white glass begins to take on the life of the place that it's made, the place that it sits. And so finally, this is where we started. This is what I knew before about how a building can be taken and put in its place. You know, Frank Lloyd Wright grounded his buildings through using an indigenous material that rose up from the ground. What Dan Graham described is an architecture that grounded itself in its place using light and using reflectivity and using transparency, which is a remarkable story of what glass can do. So I knew this going in, but I didn't understand the rest, and I learned a lot. Thank you.
So we have a few minutes if anyone has any questions for Tom. Yes, over here. Do we have a, Scott, do we have a mic here? Here we go. Excellent.
Oh, excellent. Look at this.
This works.
How did you account for the snow load on the skylights, and do you have a melting system, and what kind of glass are the skylights made out of?
Wow, that's a loaded question. You know, whenever you do a building, you have all sorts of prescribed loads that are there. And certainly you have to take into account an immense snow load, particularly for a climate like this. You have a live load, you have a dead load. The dead load is the weight of the material. The live load is the weight of what is snow and people and rain and all sorts of things that can happen. And then the structural engineer takes that and he even ramps that up. So there's an enormous amount of load that these skylights can take. The glass is made of two specific layers of glass. The first layer is clear, then there's an airspace, and then there's a laminated layer. And laminated means two pieces of glass that have been glued together. And then the bottom of that piece of glass is a frosted layer, so that you don't get any reflectivity from the gallery down below, but it gives you an indirect light. It takes the light particles and it sprinkles them so that you get the array of light, but you don't get the direct rays. So there's a lot of glass and a lot of technology in the skylight up there.
I have two questions. I heard you say you knew little about glass. What do you think it was that you said to Corning that got you the commission? And number two, was there any consideration as to the number of objects that would be displayed in these galleries?
Well, it certainly wasn't the bus parking that got me the job, I don't think. You know, I don't know. I mean, it's a little bit hard to tell. I never sit on the other side of the table to figure out what it is, but I certainly came up with a sense of curiosity. I mean, I was really curious about what it was, and we actually made these little 8.5 by 11 cards, and we had started just beginning to try to understand what it meant. And I think we were really curious about what this building could be. And so I would like to think it was our curiosity, because that is what led us all the way through the project.
What about the number of objects?
You know, we actually talked about that a lot. We talked about how many objects to put in the building. And that was a topic for months and months and months. And finding the right ones and finding how many to put in there was a very carefully and thoughtfully discussed topic. And I think we got it right. That is the one thing I think we got right. Because I think had the building been too crowded, then you wouldn't have been able to have space and light around each one to begin to get lost in the work. But that's a big topic. That's a big, big topic. Thank you.
Do you do residential?
We love to do houses. We actually do love to do houses. We have about 3 or 4 going right now. I think it's we do really large projects, but we also do really, really small houses and love it. Absolutely love it. Actually, a lot of the development in the office, a lot of things that we work on later in larger projects come from houses. So it's a kind of laboratory for us to learn. We love that. Yes? The snow. Yes, you guys had a lot of it.
Two things. It seems that the better time to visit the museum would be when there is no snow on the roof, because then you get all the different light. That's just a statement, maybe. And the other thing, is there any device to melt it or get it off?
You know, we study the light. Obviously, there's not as much light in the wintertime as there is in the summertime, so the light actually varies from 450 to upwards of 500-foot candles in the summer, but it goes to 150-foot candles there in the wintertime on December 21st. So there's an enormous amount of light still in the winter. And I was actually here the opening weekend. There was some snow on the roof, and there was plenty of light in here because we're just able to open the roof up here more than you'd ever be able to do in another museum. Most other museums, just to compare, when I say 450-foot candles, works on paper take 10-foot candles. Paintings take 30. So a normal museum is reasonably dimly lit. And so 150-foot candles in the wintertime still allows for snow to be up there. And yes, Joe, we have some snow melting up there, right in those gutters, because the gutters are the most vulnerable places for the collection of ice in there. Yes?
I wonder what it was about Irwin Eich's Heads of Littleton that you found so compelling.
You know, I find it hard to talk about what it is about some works that I'm affected by, but I keep going back to that one. I don't know why. I don't know whether it's because his different, you know, the different personalities of his face. I don't know what it is, but I love it. I just love it. It's the way I used to, you know, in New York, before MoMA was expanded, and I moved to New York in 1980 or so, and I used to go at particularly troubling moments up to see the water lilies at MoMA by Monet. And I don't know why I really did that, but I'd always go and sit on the bench right there and see that. And I'm not sure I can really tell you why I love that, but it was calming. That's the great thing about art. Hi.
Hi. So what do you take away from this project that, I mean, sounds like you learned a lot, and you know, what do you take away from this project being a laboratory that will inform your work in the future? Is there anything in particular?
You know, I'm not sure I'm equipped to answer that. There's no telling what's going on up here. I mean, you know. But I mean, I have to be frank about this. I mean, what I do take away is how important it is to have a kind of collaborative working environment. I mean, it kind of cemented my thought about how important it is when you make a work of architecture that's this ambitious, how important it is to have a critical client and you know, a collaborative client. And I mean, to have those two things and to build a building so closely with an owner, with a user, with the people here, and to be surrounded in a kind of an isolated place. You know, we're not building in New York or Pittsburgh or in a city. We're building in a place that's reasonably isolated. I think our thoughts were reasonably isolated. And I think all of that went to making a kind of an extraordinary work that maybe was not possible elsewhere. Carol.
Can you say a little bit more about where we are and the design of this campus and how your building fits into it?
That's a really good question, because we talked about that a lot when we were making it, because we were wondering, you know, there's so many different generations and there's so many voices here, that what was our voice going to be? And what was this building going to say about a kind of sense of contemporary spirit? How was this building going to speak? And we, month after month after month, we began to take things away. And finally, when we ended up with this white volume, for us, it began to not shout through its form, but the whiteness and the purity and the kind of contemporary optimistic spirit that it gave to the contemporary voices inside of it seemed to resonate with me. And to say that it didn't have a flamboyant form, I think we certainly didn't want it to compete with the other voices here on campus, but we learned a lot from, what is that building, Rob? I keep remembering. C. I keep calling it B, but it's C. Shows you.
Someday your building will get one.
Right. What are you down to, I hope? But I mean, certainly the simplicity of that building resonated with us, and the kind of dialogue then began to speak. But you know, things don't happen with us very quickly. It took a long time to digest what we were making here and how to really bring that kind of simplicity and that voice. But I do kind of associate a whiteness with a purity and with a contemporary spirit that I think is important about these works, these glass works of our moment here.
Good evening, sir. My name's Thomas Savino, and I just want to say I really appreciate your style of architecture. And getting back to that issue on snow, I know that you have a lot of engineers.
Joe, I'm going to get you up here soon.
You have a lot of engineers with
Yes.
a lot of good science going on, and I did note that half-inch of snow on the lighting on opening day. And I thought it was great because a half an inch of snow, you know this better than I, there's some sort of mathematics to the whole thing, but the snow doesn't block the sunlight at all. What is it, diffracts it or something? Now I know when you get to, I don't know, but you know that when you get to a certain thickness of snow, it blocks the light. But a half an inch of snow I thought was just incredible. It added yet another dimension to the concept of the various natural lights that can be let in through that ceiling is absolutely astounding, sir. Thank you.
You are a man after my own heart, my friend. I mean, that kind of awareness, I think, is exactly what's going on with the bottom coating of the glass. It is the whiteness there, and it lets the light sprinkle away. And that is the beauty of white glass, that it gives you this amazing array, but it doesn't lose the color, doesn't lose the color of the sky. Thank you.
I just want to say that I've been to a lot of museums, and when I walked into this space, it was going to heaven. I remember the old movies when they tried to depict what happened later. You would have this incredible white space, and I said, I'm here. Anyway, you got a real gem here. It's just a wonderful space, and congratulations, and thank you for this community. It's great.
That is so meaningful to me. Thank you so much. Yes.
Hi there. I'm an elementary art teacher in the Corning School District, and a lot of my students are very excited because they know that the student art show is this week. But they're also very excited when they come back from their field trips and seeing the new wing. They know that I was going to come tonight to listen to you. So what is the main message you'd like me to bring back to them? Because they're looking forward to hearing.
Wow.
And it's a tough crowd. It's K through 5, so.
You know, just as I'm going to try to avoid that question. But, you know, I do think it's important, I mean, really important, as they do, for children to come here. Can you imagine a building like this is so filled with light, that's so filled with optimism, it has a sense of openness and accessibility. It seems like it's open to all, that art is open to all, that the way these are made can be me. And I think at an early age, children going through museums is one of the most important things that we can do to let this voice speak to them. What would I tell them? I mean, you have to say that anything's possible. You know, I mean, anything is really possible. And I would hope that the building has that sense of optimism about what our voices today can do.
If I could just add the voice of the artist to this, and this is secondhand information, but certainly what we witnessed over the opening weekend, the reaction that we saw from all of the artists who came, who were represented into the wing, was a renewed optimism. They loved the space. It sent them away with new thoughts and new ideas and a new perception of light.
Yeah.
So
Well,
thank you for
Carol.
that.
That's so nice. Thank you.
We have time for one more question.
What happened to the buses?
Well, I'm just glad we didn't end with snow. That's all. The buses have their place. Over there, yeah, there. But I don't think this is going to hurt visitation. I think there'll be some buses here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, one and all, and one more round of applause for Tom Phifer.